OG Rose, and today we're going to be talking about peer-to-peer, the Commons Manifesto, which comes out of the P2P Peer-to-Peer Foundation. I really enjoyed this text. I really enjoyed its insight and found it just a great read, easy to read, insightful, really framed some of the major issues we have in economics, political economy, and the like. And I think we need to take this book very seriously, and I think we need to take the work at the Peer-to-Peer Foundation very, very seriously. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Michel Bauwens on a number of occasions, and I always find him very insightful. He's a very hard worker. His Substack is just full with research, insight, great thought. He's just a complete delight. He wrote this book with two other co-authors, Vasilis and Alex, and Michel was one of the authors of it, and I really found it a fascinating work, and would highly suggest it. You can get it on Amazon today. It really helps you grasp why a commons-centric future is not only possible but doable. I think the question of what is the commons is addressed by the book. I think Michel makes it very clear that the commons is an institution. It's not just kind of a vague idea. It's actually something that exists. The Peer-to-Peer Foundation, it focuses on things like social relations, technological infrastructure, a new mode of production and property, and ultimately a transition to an economy that can be generative towards people and nature. So there's this emphasis on thinking in the commons about how the economic model is more extractive. It follows, say, the commodity form, how to think about entities as fungible. But all of this seems unsustainable and also very problematic. I think it also psychologically trains us to treat things as products, as means to an end, as fungible. We don't treat them in their fullness. We're prone to algebra versus geometry, to allude to Leibniz. I'll talk about Leibniz a lot, thanks to Anthony Morley teaching me everything I know. And I think we can look at the commons as, how do we create a social space that operates according to a different value form? And I think the value form is a central concept of the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. So we can think of the commons as this work as trying to bring about a new ecosystem of value creation, which is sought in implementing peer-to-peer technologies and practices, which by extension would make possible things like a competition, experimentation, and testing of different value forms. The term value forms we can associate with Marx, economics, and generally there's a debate between, say, the labor form, the labor theory of value, the form, the theory of the labor, the value form theory. And certainly it seems like human beings value things, and that's why we desire them and seek them. And under capitalism, we tend to quantify value according to labor. Labor, how much labor it took, the abstract social use, which automatically means there's a system that defines abstract social use, and it quantifies that abstract principle according to labor. It's at least the way that I argue it. I think under all this then is the human capacity to value things gets kind of hidden, or it's projected onto the labor form. And so we stop thinking about what is value and how to engage in values. Different modes of exchange, as someone like Karatani will emphasize, open up thinking about value forms and a way to socially relate beyond the commodity form. And we can see Michel Bauwens as working to make us aware of those different modes of exchange and possibilities of value forms, which I think is incredibly important. I mean, you can change the modes of production all day long, but that will not necessarily change how people value the world. And if they continue to value it according to the commodity form, well, then it's not going to matter too much what the modes of production are, in my opinion. Now, that doesn't mean the commodity form is bad. Please note, markets have a very important role. Basically, as we often talk about at OG Rose, autonomous anything is bad. When there's a single value form, it tends to be monopolistic, and there's no competition, and there tends to be a collapse of innovation according to a competition of the different value forms and ways of thinking, and so you get stagnancy. So you need a plethora of value forms. Not just one. And so that's part of the issue. The commodity value form, you could say, or value as quantified through commodity and labor is so effective and so good at dealing with problems of how to make global pluralism relate according to that abstract social norm, that it's very easy to then treat it as the only value form. But of course, that leads to various problems. Now we talk about this problem: commodity, capital, pricing mechanisms, the value of capitalism, the dangers of the commodity form, etc., so forth, and belonging again too. And I think Michel and the Peer-to-Peer Foundation help us see the problem. I personally deeply appreciate the emphasis and focus of the peer-to-peer, because I don't believe it's possible to change much if we are incapable of changing how people value themselves, their worlds, and their lives. And modes of production and economies can be seen as tools which help us realize our values. And if we change these tools and even improve them, if we continue to value in the same way, nothing will ultimately change, as we were saying. So the Peer-to-Peer Foundation considers an economy of value creation, we might say, which ultimately orbits the possibility of using peer-to-peer technologies to make possible small group dynamics at the global level. This is a key phrase. How do you do small group dynamics globally? That seems impossible. Well, this is what we can see the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is in the business of. And what I would note is I think this is a very powerful vision, because it addresses or takes seriously someone like Leopard Coe, who wrote The Breakdown of Nations, a tremendous book, without ending up in the isolation or bifurcation suggested in Dugin's fourth political theory. And I think we can see Alexander Dugin's fourth political theory as taking seriously the need for something like a common, something like a small community that's operating according to its own internal logic or its own unique Dasein, you might say, with Dugin. And I think that's all very true. But the problem is that it has to bifurcate the world, which will unfortunately probably lead to various breakdowns of trade, maybe even conflict and war and so on and so forth. But if the alternative for Dugin is everyone being reduced to the logic of neoliberalism and capital, and that would be, if Nick Land is correct, that capital leads to transhumanism, and that would ultimately lead to as someone like Dugin is concerned about, the replacement of the human being by technology. Well then, Dugin seems to have a point. Well, this is where I think peer-to-peer is a really big deal, because it offers a way to address the concerns of Dugin without this radical bifurcation. It is considering the possibility of small group dynamics at the global level, as opposed to a retreat from the global level. Now, of course, someone like Dugin says he's not retreating from the global level, but practically it does look like that way. It is very difficult to say what it would look like to not have Duginism lead to something far more bifurcating and isolationist. Now, this is why I actually think it's a fascinating discussion to consider, say, the work of the Commons and the Peer-to-Peer Foundation with someone like Dugin, and hopefully in Belonging Again too, we'll be able to get that sufficient attention. But anyway, on the notion of values, we could say in the past that there were Christian values and market values and even democratic values. Like there was this, when you had a robust locality tradition, there was many value forms in competition that had different roles, and just gradually and slowly we've moved to operating according to the dominance of the market value form. And this makes me think of someone like Ivan Illich, how we are basically disabled to operate outside the value form of commodity, how we are disabled to sustain ourselves outside of the system, and this likely contributes to the loss of the competition of value forms. And, there's also there's a history for why value has come to be kind of defined almost exclusively according to the quantification of the labor form. Value was, for most of history since Aristotle, defined by the desire and need for the products of human labor, the interactions. Exchange was all but an institution crystallizing this interaction. That's from the book. Exactly, exchange was seen as not having a formative role, but an accidental role, to use Aristotelian, or it wasn't having an essential role, but a secondary role. And so we haven't thought about exchange, but actually exchange transforms following a Karatani, and what the Peer-to-Peer Foundation emphasizes. Exchange transforms the value form and opens up possibilities of valuation. So it doesn't have to just be the desiring of labor. There are other modes of exchange, and that's really important. And you see what has happened is over time, theoretical discussion on value has gradually abated and the concept has become almost interchangeable with the market price. Well, at that point, value, the possibility of thinking different value forms is gone. Now, there's an argument to be made that maybe today we need a different word than value. Maybe value is too problematic. It's too kind of drunk or drowning in connotations of neoliberalism. That's an argument that can be made. You know, we've talked about that at Theory Underground. I go back and forth because if you introduce a new term, then it can be harder for people to understand what you're talking about. It can alienate the majority of people. But then again, if you use a term that has a lot of pre-existing connotations, that also can keep people from understanding what you're talking about. And I know Rudy has talked about the possibility of a different term, which is pretty fascinating. I, throughout OG Rose over many years, has used the word value and new value forms because I associate it with the tradition that connects value and virtue. Say from an Aristotle, value ethics, virtue ethics, values, and, you know, thinking about morals. But I also do understand if there's an argument to be had that a different word from value is needed. But at the same time, that it's always difficult to find the perfect language, right? So that's an open discussion. Still, I think talking about value in the context that peer-to-peer is and that I am is opening up possibilities of new horizons of valuation. And taking that very seriously, according to new modes of exchange, which the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is asking questions about. What would the technologies be necessary to make that possible, and how and what kind of consciousness or towardness do human beings need to realize the most of value beyond just capital exchange value. This is important because there's something about capitalism, if we're thinking that in Labor, Time, and Social Domination by Postone, he'll talk about something like capitalism is a system of abstract impersonal domination. Relative to earlier social forms, people appear to be independent, but they actually are subject to a system of social domination that seems not social but objective. And so you have this concern in various Marxist thinkers on the idea that one of the ways that capital works is not like any kind of direct force or anything, but an organic operation, a kind of organic abstract social form that organizes thoughts and activities. And if you're not aware of that, you could end up controlled and not even know it, right? So this abstract form is what changing value is all about. And the argument is, if you focus on changing modes of production, that will not necessarily change the abstract social form according to which people value. So you have to get into the modes of exchange, and you have to get directly into value formulation and how humans come to value things. And those possibilities, though, are tied to the lived practical experience of human beings, their financial system, their ability to show their work, their ability to do work that they value, all of these different things. It opens questions about all of those different areas, which is a lot, but fortunately we have the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, which is doing so much work to help us understand the possibilities in this area. So please check them out today. Michel Bauwens has a tremendous Substack with wonderful, wonderful resources. The Peer-to-Peer Wiki is full to the brim with resources. And I think the question of the commons is central for us today. And so I appreciate this book, and please please pick it up today. You can find it on Amazon. And thank you so much for your time.